Game Theory Class 7 Video 1. In this video we're going to talk about strictly dominated strategies. These are very related to what we spoke about earlier in this module, strictly dominating and strictly dominant strategies. So let's begin. The definition of a strictly dominated strategy is as follows. It's a really simple definition. So a strictly dominated strategy is just any strategy that is strictly dominated by another strategy. So for example, we say that X is strictly dominated if there is another strategy so Y, for example, such that Y strictly dominates X. Okay? And the only place where you can go wrong thinking about this is that when talking about strictly dominated strategies, it's sufficient to be strictly dominated by one other strategy. This is in contrast to when we spoke about strictly dominant strategies. So to be strictly dominant, you have to strictly dominate all of the other strategies. But to be strictly dominated, you just have to be dominated by at least one of the other strategies. Okay? So it's a bit asymmetric, but that's the definition. Let's do an example. So here's a game, and the question is just find the strictly dominated strategies. If there are any, if they exist. There might not be. There doesn't always have to be a strictly dominated strategy. Okay, it's like the same situation as strictly dominant strategies. There doesn't always need to exist one. Sometimes there does and sometimes there doesn't. So let's just begin. If I want to test to see if a particular strategy is strictly dominated, I need to see if there's another strategy which dominates it. Okay, so let's just go through strategy by strategy and test them all. So let's begin with strategy A. Okay, does anything strictly dominate A? Well, if I compare A and B, then I see that 1 is bigger than -2. So B does not dominate A. Okay, what about A and C? I see that 1 is bigger than -1. So C does not dominate A. So this means that A is not strictly dominated. Okay, how about B? If I look at B, well, if I compare A and B, I see that 1 is strictly bigger than -2. So that's encouraging. But then over here in the Y column, I see that 3 is strictly bigger than 2. So this means that sometimes A is better than B, and sometimes B is better than A, which means that A does not dominate B. If I compare B and C, well then -2 is less than -1, but 3 is bigger than 0. So it's the same situation. Sometimes B is better, sometimes C is better. So again, not strictly dominated. By any of the other strategies. So let's try C. If I compare A and C, I see that 1 is strictly bigger than -1, and 2 is strictly bigger than 0. So this is good. This is what we want. Okay, this means that C is strictly dominated. In fact, it's strictly dominated by A. But that's not too important. All that matters is that there is some other strategy which strictly dominates C. So that means that C is strictly dominated. And notice C isn't strictly dominated by B. Like B, -1 is bigger than 2 and 0 is less than 3. So C is not strictly dominated by B, but that's okay, because it only needs to be strictly dominated by at least one other strategy, and A is that strategy. So C is a strictly dominated strategy. Now let's look at X and Y. So if I look at X, if I compare X and Y, I see that 4 is less than or equal to 4, 0 is strictly less than 9, and 0 is strictly less than 2. So this isn't a strict domination, this is a weak domination, because not all of these inequalities is the strict inequality. So I can say that X is weakly dominated by Y, but not strict. Okay, it's not a strict domination because of this bit here. Okay, because this is a weak inequality. And that's it. So the only strictly dominated strategy is C. That's the only strictly dominated strategy. If the question asked you to find all the strictly dominated strategies, the answer would just be C. That's it for this example, and that's it for this video.